media, possibly misrepresented, or maybe not presented at all, I imagine you wondered what else you might have got wrong. You can't go back to sleep. Woke indeed. And that, I believe, is the silver lining of some of the madness that has shaken our society this last decade. A paradigm shift, a forging of a more engaged citizenship who don't automatically toe the party line of a two-party system, who'll do some research and explore and talk, look for facts, question those facts, question the questioning of those facts. But what then? How do you organise around them? How do you participate in a democracy rather than let democracy be something that just happens to you? If your new mantra is policy, not party, then what do you do when they don't match? In my case, I voted for what I hoped was the best of a bad bunch. It's not exactly inspiring. And that's why I'm congratulating Reform for their milestone. I'm not a Reform voter. But whatever you think of Nigel Farage, he's turned his ideas and concerns and policies into a major political party. Today, Reform's existence has become more a fixture than an aberration. I don't think that necessarily points to him becoming the next Prime Minister. Party membership doesn't indicate electoral victory. Labour had over 500,000 members when Jeremy Corbyn led them to their greatest electoral loss since 1935. And even though it's a lot less now at 370,000, Labour just secured their largest majority since 1997. A house on stilts maybe, but that house is likely to stand the next few years. Kemibadenoch may contest the numbers. Personally, I think that's a misstep, and maybe she's right that
For me, that the Labour victory just tells you how bad. I'd say it all began with the debacle of COVID. Boris Johnson and his cronies not sticking to the rules, having parties, Partygate, blah, 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 lying to us. But the way they ran the country was such a strong majority. Boris, of all people, one of the most intelligent politicians of his generation, easily. Kemibadenoch, for me, she is no Maggie Thatcher. And that is what. If you're going to be a female, you need to be Thatcheresque. You need to be ruthless, strong, hard lined on everything. Soft on some things, there needs to be, but you need to be ruthless. And I just don't think she's that person. And this has proven it already.
the Tories are still ahead with thousands of new members since her election, and maybe lowering the fee to a tenner for under 25s is a trick, although I think engaging younger people is good. And certainly it's fine to question what that money actually gets them compared to membership of other political parties.
Do you think in 2.5, 3 years' time, do you think I will get whoever, if it's Keir Starmer, whoever is running for Labour, for leader of the government, Keir Starmer, would he ever come on a podcast like mine where I could grill him for 2 or 3 hours? Would Kemibadenoch? I don't think either of them would. I think they'd both shone out. Nigel Farage, I think, would come on. I think other leaders would come on and put them to shame. And they'd probably come out looking good. If you can hold a 2 or 3 hour conversation of awkward questions, light-hearted questions, all sorts of questions about life and the world, and not just your policies. I think you do very well at the elections. The channel's way above mine at the moment. That would be well more qualified to have these people on, but that's where I'm aiming to get at, guys. So help me get there. Just hit that subscribe button.
But that's not the main point. There are now more people, more engaged, more invested, more educated in how this country is run. about the policies that will run it. And that's not a bad thing. Critics say Labour may have gotten away with few policies going into the last election, but that same trick won't work again in the future. People now have one more contender for their vote. Hopefully, there'll be more. Political parties will be less able to take our votes for granted. Political parties will be less able to take our opinions for granted. Maybe one day there'll be a political party that makes me excited to vote for them. Our political system hasn't yet caught up to this new paradigm of a fragmented electorate, but an engaged one. Reform success, though, serves an example of what's possible and gets us that bit closer.
We chose this life in the rainforest away from it all, and while it is so beautiful living so closely to nature, it can be isolating to live so remotely. In the busyness of life, it's always nice to have someone to talk to about how you're feeling.
Let's get the thoughts of my panel. GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson, journalist Agony Aunt and novelist Hilary Freeman, and journalist and communications
isn't right.
Advisor Linda Doobally. Nigel, if I may start with you, as I don't know if you still vote Labour, but obviously that's seems to be
my vote's confidential, but I support the Labour Party.
You support the Labour Party, fine. Do you think that there has been this paradigm shift over the last few years?
Oh, yeah, no question about it. I mean, everything you're saying there about people being more engaged in politics, questioning politics, all that is to the good. The question really is reform a flash in the pan, or can it really last? The problem the reform has got is that the first past the post system is terribly unkind to tiny parties. Now, the Lib Dems, curiously, were able to get as many MPs, 72 this time round, as they would have got if it had been proportional representation. Nigel Farage is now trying to find out how they manage that. So the Lib Dems got 12% of the vote, 72 MPs. Nigel gets 14% of the vote and gets only 5 MPs. If you were doing it on proportional representation, that works out as 820,000 votes for one Reform MP and 49,000 votes for one Lib Dem MP. So it's not fair in that kind of sense. The idea of him actually being the next Prime Minister, I think, is a bit pie in the sky. It could happen, but you're probably looking at if reform does last, and there is an if to that. If it does last, before they can make really big inroads, you're probably talking 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, Linda, what do you think? I mean, obviously, look, reform, they're celebrating, and it is somewhat of a milestone. But as Nigel says, it's obviously...
It is a milestone, but it doesn't necessarily indicate, a deep-seated move forward. But there is momentum there. I mean, what we might see, I think there will be a by-election in Runcorn early in the new year, after you remember the Labour MP that...
I think people are forgetting here as well is the election. The election is in 2029, right? Lots can happen in politics in one day, let alone 3.5, 4 years, right? Labour, for me, are only going to get worse. That's my prediction. I think the Tories will try. I think the Tories, surely they can't get any worse. They need to change their approach. Less woke. No wokeness has got to go. The only woke parties that should be left are Labour, Lib Dems, Green Party, people like that. They're the only woke parties that should be around. Yeah, if you're a Conservative Party, a Republican in America, woke has gone rogue.
Punch the guy on the pavement. Well, when that by-election happens, Reform were in second place in that constituency. So what happens in that by-election could be important. And then you've got the local elections in May. Now, we need to keep a close eye on those to see what happens there. But all of these milestones are important because they all mean momentum. They all mean that Nigel Farage's Reform Party is going in front of the camera, going in front of audiences, going in front of viewers all the time. And that kind of recognition is really important. The other thing I want to say is, I think at grassroots level, there is a real tipping point happening where people are far less tribal than they were. It's really obvious to me that in local communities, they will start to make up their minds by what is actually affecting them right then and there in their community. Yes. I can see that in my own town.
And that's the way it should be. What's going on in your city or your town or the town next to you, town next to you, sitting next to you, your surrounding area, right? Some maybe look better than others, but looks can be deceiving. There's an underbelly to British cities. There's a major dark underbelly in British cities. Just like any city in the world, right? But specifically here. And I just think reform, this is not a flash in the pan. They just need to keep it going for another 3.5 years and they will win the general election.
Yeah. And arguably, I mean, Hilary, that's exciting for democracy, isn't it? That's a healthy democracy.
Well, it is, but I think at the moment people are sort of floundering around. Either they are, I think Labour lost the election. The Tories lost the election more than Labour won it. And I think Nigel Farage is gaining people who are apathetic, who feel that nobody stands for them anymore. But that doesn't actually mean that they're going to vote for him in the long term. I think at the moment people are feeling politically homeless and feel like they're not being represented by the parties that used to represent them. That doesn't necessarily mean that once things change, I mean, we don't know what's going to happen in the next few years, that will translate into a vote for him. And I think people are just saying, well, here's somebody who's got a lot of personality, who's making a lot of noise.
He's resonant.
Yes.
That's what he is.
Yes, and they feel like we need someone to stand up for us. But that's not the same as somebody coming along with policies that they really want to vote for.
Well, you say that, but I would say that some of his appeal is that he is presenting policies that a lot of people want to vote for. And Nigel, the argument goes that it forces other parties to take note and it kind of forces their hand.
Yeah, I mean, other parties are worried about him. There was no question that both.
See, this Labour man, he's worried about him because he might put an end to this insane immigration policy. It's insane inheritance tax. It's insane attack on the pensioners. And God knows what else.
Labour Party and the Tory Party are really concerned about what he's doing. I think if you look at the policies as they stand at the moment, they all kind of melt away with a bit of scrutiny. At the moment, it's immigration has become the major issue. That is kind of reform's platform. If you look at other policies, they just don't work. I mean, they've got one policy, for instance, which is if you can't see a GP in 3 days, you will get a voucher to go private. Well, it is just nonsense. There are about 3,000 private GPs in the country and 500 million appointments at NHS GP surgeries. So even if 1% decided they wanted to actually take advantage of this, it's impossible to work. So that kind of scrutiny then means their policies fall apart.
Think how hard it was, right? Think how hard it was to get a GP appointment, right? 3-4 years ago. It all started around COVID, right? It hasn't changed. Now we have this insane immigrant. I remember under David Cameron we had 100,000 coming in and people were moaning. We've had 9 times that amount in the last 12 months. 1 million people. Just under 1 million. What sort of pressure is that putting on our doctors and our doctors' surgeries, our chemists? They're shutting down left, right, and centre all over the place, and they want to go to just big pharma chemists. It's really disturbing. What about our poor hospitals? Beggars belief.